Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Facebook Live Legal Surgery. This one will be based on legal considerations for small businesses. I have done various ones, as I'm sure you're aware. The whole idea around these Facebook Live is to give a bit more of an indication to the everyday person as to general legal issues they come up with. If you have any questions, then please feel free to ask them throughout. If you don't have any, but you'd like to ask me personally, then please feel free to send me a message or an email or give me a call, and I'll happily go through that with you. It can be on any subject you like. It doesn't necessarily need to be on the subject that we're discussing this evening. So my background is I've worked locally in the area for 15 years, qualified several times over and going to be qualified again, and I'm just trying to bring the legal world more direct to the individual. Hi, and thanks to everyone saying hi. The previous legal surgery was advice for cohabiting couples. I have put some advice up on that generally, but if you need anything directly, then please do let me know. I will be doing a more detailed leaflet on that as well in due course. So this week's subject matter is general legal issues for small businesses to consider. So a lot of people are now going out on their own, and there's certain things that you need to be aware of. I'm by no means a specialist in all of the things, but they are things that I've certainly come across whilst I set up my own business, so things you do need to consider. Now, there's various types of businesses. There could be a sole trader where you work on your own. There can be a partnership where you work with someone but not under a formal arrangement of the company, and then you've got a company as well. So with a sole trader, it's not generally registered, and you are quite often personally liable for any potential issues. So in that instance, you do need to have a backup plan for potential personal problems that may arise. So generally with sole traders, you are the company yourself, and if something happens to you, then it's going to be very difficult for that company to keep going. So you need to have potentially a backup plan to have that in place so your business can still function when or if anything does happen to you. With a partnership, you do really need to consider having a partnership agreement. Without one, it will be the statute that comes into play, and it doesn't always go the way you want it to be. So it's really important to have that partnership agreement in place so you can have the description of percentages of ownership, but also not just in relation to costs and profit and loss, but also in relation to responsibilities, who's responsible for what, and so on. The benefit of having a partnership is you have got a joint liability, and you can also have a limited liability partnership, which means that it is limited and not necessarily personal. You then have a company. They are registered at Companies House, and that is limited liability. So there are various advantages and disadvantages for having a company or a partnership and everything else. Generally speaking, it's tax implications and what you're trying to achieve and the best possible way of doing it. So it's always best to take the advice of an accountant when you're looking into this. Other issues for companies is GDPR, so that's all to do with data protection. There's quite a lot of in-depth detail about that, but generally speaking, the important thing is to remember to only retain information you need for the purpose that it's been given, and that there's a legitimate interest for the person with the details you're holding. This is quite a complex area. I can't go into detail of all of it because it will take days in itself, but the general principle at the moment is that it hasn't been tested in court to a large extent, so we're waiting to see really what cases come forward to suggest what legitimate interest means. Once that's happened, it will be all over the media, all over the press, but if you have any questions in the meantime, I can help you with my general understanding of that particular area. So you also have to consider things like employment and HR issues, so you need to have employment contracts, statutory holiday requirements, national living wage, government pension schemes, and you also need to consider health and safety and first aid requirements are all essential where you have got a company or a business, of any type where you've got employees. You also need to, this is more my area of expertise, but you will also need to consider the type of property or premises you're working from. So commercial property, you can have various types of property. So you can have freehold, which is owned outright. So in that instance, you need to consider things like planning permission and the use class to make sure that you have got the appropriate use class for the purpose you're using the building for. You can also lease a premises. So with commercial leases, the relevant things you need to be aware of are rent review clauses, break clauses, and rights to renew. So rent review means that your rent can increase throughout the term, but you just need to check when that can be done and on what basis. Quite often the leases are drafted, so the rent doesn't go down, it only goes up or stays the same. So you need to be very aware of that. You also need to be aware with a break clause whether or not both parties can break the contract. So it could be landlord and tenant who can break that. So you don't want to perhaps invest a lot into a property if the landlord could potentially then take that away from you. You do need to also consider the rights to renew under the Landlord and Tenant Act. So generally speaking, the majority of them, those rights are excluded. There is a statutory right for you to actually retain the property that you've got and be able to renew the lease after it expires. But quite often, if you're asked to sign a statutory declaration before you enter into a commercial premises lease, that's generally an indication that those rights have been removed. So you would need to get a whole new lease at the end of the term. The other alternative to that is a commercial license. So that's more where it's a fixed term. So usually it's sort of 12 months. So a license is very different to a lease in that you don't have the full tenure as such. You just have a right to be there. It's more like a tenancy agreement than the commercial lease, which is usually a deed that you enter into to ensure that you have got that premises for that fixed time, and it's usually 6 years, 6 years, something like that. So that's the sort of very simplistic a few things to consider, but there are also some personal considerations for small business owners. So I mentioned briefly earlier, if you're a sole trader, you need to have a continuity plan. So effectively, as a sole trader, if you aren't able to run your business, it may have issues. So it may be that, you know, some people in trades, if they can't work, then their business ceases to trade. But you have to consider things like suppliers you may need to pay, bank accounts, things like that. And when we talk about not being able to do so, it could mean that you're either permanently or temporarily incapacitated. So if you were to have an accident or lose capacity, then you need to have someone in place who can then take over that company for you, or business for you. Without that, you have to apply for something called a deputyship order, and that can be very difficult and long-winded to get. The main significance is that is, like I say, the access to the bank accounts. The bank don't just automatically let your spouse have access. If people think that is the case, it's not necessarily the case at all. So something you should consider is having a power of attorney in place to actually nominate a specific person to take things over if you are unable to actually deal with matters yourself. It could be that you were stuck abroad and you weren't able to actually deal with things, so that power of attorney could then be in place. So different types of power of attorney. You can have a personal lasting power of attorney, which you have two different ones. One's property and financial affairs, and the other is health and welfare. I have been through all of those before, but if you have any queries, you can either look back on the videos or just give me a question. Ask me a question about it. You also have the business LPA, which is very specific to the business, and that means that business has its own personnel under the power of attorney who could take that over for you. So the business attorneys must be able to carry out the role of the donor in the business LPA, and the donor should consider giving specific and detailed instructions on what powers a business attorney should hold. So it gives a very specific definition of what they would want to do. So a lasting power of attorney would be fine whilst you're still alive. If something happened to you and you died, you would need to have made provisions within your will separately with regards to the business and how it would continue and so on. So they're more of the personal considerations, but in reference to an individual's business. I can't see we've had any questions. This is quite an unusual topic, but something I wanted to get across because I know that many people are actually taking the step and doing business for themselves. So really that's all the information I have in the absence of any questions. It's a very, very vast subject, but that's just a very brief overview of what things to consider. thank you for watching. If there are any subjects that you would like me to review in due course, please do let me know. I will be doing a blog on this over the next couple of weeks. Please do look out for my posts across all the social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. And don't forget to go on to my competition for the Easter giveaway to win the bottle of champagne and chocolates. All you need to do is guess how many marshmallows are in the jar. Thank you very much. That's me, Lucy Beck, the lawyer who listens. Thank you.